Þá ætla ég að kynna fyrsta erlenda fyrirlesaran. Það Peder Elgaard. Peder arkitekt í Kaupmannahöfn og kennari við arkitektaskólana í Danmörku. Hann hefur getið sér gott orð í endurbótum og endurgerð bygginga og var meðal annars frá árinu 2008 til 2012 húsameistari og fagstjóri Krúnunnar og hafði sem slíku forræði yfir það bil 700.000 fermetrum af byggingum dönsku Krúnunnar. Please give a warm welcome to Peder Elgaard.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for my Icelandic language, so I'll try to do this in some kind of English, which I hope you will understand. Today's theme about modernism, I will talk a little about from our own platform of profession, which is conservation projects. We have a small architectural practice in Copenhagen, which works with old buildings, more or less, that is it. And today about modernism, we'll talk about how we work with them and try to come closer to the answers of why we are doing this and that, more than how. And it's a little bit about understanding maybe some of the ideas that goes behind this style. Actually, it can be any kind of style, but there are some specialities that is linked to the modernistic period. And one of the main thing is the approach to history, where I tried to, in the headline, to say a little bit about dogmas. And you could, I think today's dogma is that we do not have any dogma, but we adapted quite a few from the modernistic era. And I'll try to go through some of them, but where is it? Is it here? Yes. This is just our own little practice. We do a little bit of everything, a wine chateau, small buildings and churches. And if you're familiar to the Venice Charter, you'll see at least a dozen violations with the examples of what we're doing here. I'll come back to that. But mainly we do everything from different kind of periods. We have a lot of these type of buildings in Copenhagen, and we do classic restoration of them. Also a few modernistic buildings, a chapel, a music scene, and a bath area. We also do new buildings, but only in the context of a historical environment. This is how to interpret this ancient 18th century period in different scales. But enough about ourselves. We'll start a place that is a long way from Copenhagen. We have a recent project in Abu Dhabi. And what you see here is the oldest building in Abu Dhabi. It's a small watchtower from, I think it's 1740s. And the reason for me to start here is because recently I met a dogma from the modernistic period, presented to me by a German architect, and I was a little bit surprised because I thought we had passed that dogma, but we hadn't. As you see, it can be quite warm down there, and the project that we're doing down there, it might have its roots in some of the modernistic ideas, but it is in this crossroad, you could say, between something European modernism and something Arab. And it's a crazy place, Abu Dhabi. It is this Bedouin culture where the heritage is mainly intangible. And then they have built this city out of the sand since 1940, 1950 or so. This is the site where you see this building lying in the middle. Our role is to provide this project with the architectural conservation services. We are sub-consultant to another Danish company who won this competition of the central square of the city. So you have this building, which is it's a cultural building. The first theater and cafe and library was in this building. So there's a lot of people in the city that is attached to this building. And in the other end of the site, you can see there we have this old fort where we have the watchtower, who has now been included in this structure. And the little palm tree huts in the front, that is from a festival that the Abu Dhabians have once every year, where they celebrate their culture and what they come from. So this spot in the city here, where it's of a very high significance for a lot of people, so that we have to deal a lot with the historic approach. This is a photo of the fort from the I think it's from 1950s. So you can see that the city has developed quite hard around it. And this is the building that we're working with, a photo taken a few years after it was finished in 1982. And it is, to some extent, a modernistic interpretation of an introvert Arab architecture. It is extremely hot down there. It's about 40, 50 degrees in summer times in the sun. So we have this sequence of courtyards and then this block that you enter, and the border between in and out is quite significant. This is what it looks today: a concrete surface from the north with detailing like this. It's a peculiar combination of style, but that is what you can see in this area. And you have these Arab tiles in the concrete surface, and details this spitter, and a central room where, of course, we can see elements of this structure and architecture that is very familiar to us, but then there's this touch and detailing from the Arab world. And this is some of the interior, quite dark actually. This is a theater block that has been cladded with these tiles. Some of them are falling off. And some of them have been fixed with a small screw. So there's a lot of problems when you have to restore and conserve a thing like this. But the process I'm going to talk a little bit about to come closer to the why question is how this job was ordered by the client, and it's a quite professional client we have here, who have made this scope of services, which is, you could say, very broad, formulated, but they want us to work in this Borough Charter process, and that is this stage 6. You see, the stage 5 that was conducted by a German company called Dogmas, and they have made a huge phone book thick report of every tiny little detail in this building that we see, a survey from building scale level, city scale level, into every little surface. And then our job was to implement all their findings in the project. And that is something that we see from project to project. And one of the big, I'll not say mistakes, but problems that occur is that the guys that do these surveys, they are not involved in the function. And that is a main thing when we discuss architecture. This guy you probably know. I always pull him in the center of a scene when we have this discussion with the clients and colleagues about history. Because what we actually are dealing with is or what we try to do is to practice some kind of value-based conservation. And that is maybe the new thing, and where we try to struggle with the dogma from the modernism. The modernism's approach to history is, if you put it very simple, it is an attempt to be objective. And maybe some of you are familiar with the Venice Charter from 1964, which is a clear-cut child, you could say, from the modernistic area, and it stands on the shoulders of Team 10 and all the guys from there. And it says more or less that every layer that you have in the building, every step in the process has a value, and it should be visible, and whatever you do should be visible in the, you could say, in the same line. So that is an attempt to be objective, which is absolutely not possible, but the generation of architects that I know before me, they were trained in that dogma. And I have a lot of colleagues that still has this approach. And some of them, they find it a little bit difficult about working value-based with conservation, because it requires a lot of explanation. And that is where this guy here, he starts in 1874 by starting this discussion. There are you could say, a hierarchy in history. He here in this book that you probably know, Use and Abuse of History are three kinds of history. The monumental history that expands, you could say, the understanding of human being. And then the antiquarian history, which belongs to the guys that thank the past from what they are today. And then there's the critical history, which is about establishing some kind of interpretation that maybe makes more sense contemporary. And in the project of Abu Dhabi, when you have this central square, it is very much about establishing this collective memory in this Bedouin culture that is so intangible. Now they will have a place where they can see, in one spot you can see the full development of the building from the fort from the 17th century and to present. And that is very much about addressing some of the in this book it is called not a revolution, but if it were, it was the understanding of why and for whom things are conserved. And that is where the value-based method becomes relevant, and actually it is the only way that you can deal with this. Every time that you make a decision in a project, you have some different parameters that you put into it. And this survey that was done, I talked about from the Germany company that did, they only had the two dimensions in their survey, which was the architecture and historic value and building technique. They did not visit the use and function part. So that is very important to have that aspect with us, of course. And these slides here are from a workshop that we did with the clients to become, you could say, aligned within the team. So everybody understood how are we going to do this. And we work like, in a normal workshop, putting posters on. And we try to establish this link from the why to the how in some very simple overviews like this by coming from this, you could say, collective memory level into a building component level. Because of course there should be some kind of link between a concrete surface or you could say changing a ceiling surface or whatever. And this little matrix that you see down to the right is a way of just putting these 4 headlines together about preservation values. What is that? And for every project you have to describe that. And that is just meaning that some parts is more important than others. And then you have a restoration strategy. How are we going to support the values? And we have the function, and that results in some very specific building component works to be done. So this is more or less today's point, that this is the important way to do. And then we have these, in this Abu Dhabi project, we had these 2 approaches. I call it the existing fabric approach, which was the German approach, that says that everything should be kept exactly as it is. Maybe minor changes could be allowed if you really had to. And then we had the architectural approach, which is a bit more subjective, which is about to develop the building, add some new qualities into it, and then find the point of balance. And that is what it is, and that is what you could see or call it is a difference from the modernistic way of dealing with historic values. There was one approach which was very, or at least tried to be very objective, and now today it is quite subjective. And this is just the method. And if we should just have a small glimpse at the historical context of working with value-based conservation, then on the theoretical side, I'm sure you all know the first 3 guys, Viollet Leduc, René Roskin, and William Morris, who were more or less, you could say, the founder of restoration philosophy in Germany, Britain, and France a few hundred years ago. Then, of course, we had the Nietzsche and Riegel, a bit more sophisticated, and then coming close to the modernistic period with Adolf Loos and Siegfried Giedion. There are others, but this is some of the main characters, and you could say, just showing their approach to describing the theory that we use today. And when it comes to you could say, the practical track, then we have left the periods of unity in style. Well, that could be another discussion if we really had, but when it comes to the 18th century, there was one way of doing it, and then some of the modernistic icons, here it is the Model Law of Le Corbusier, placed just next to the Venice Charter that comes in 1964, which is, as I said before, it stands on the shoulder of the modernistic thinking. And then in the period after that, we see different kinds of projects all over Europe who has this objective approach to preserving not only the modernistic monument, but any monument. And then some years ago, even Rem Koolhaas, he came out of the cupboard as a restoration architect. This is one of the plan from an article he did about Beijing, about this barcode of city planning, where in every second track you preserve everything, and in the other tracks you demolish everything and then you build new. And this is maybe where it starts. This thing, you could say, in a very significant way, it is communicated that not everything has the same value. One of the I'll just skip this one. One of the very good examples we have today comes here from Germany, from the Neues Museum. I hope you have visited it. If not, then you must go. And it is a very good example because it has every position from conserving a painting in one corner, and then you have a new addition, new architectural addition in the other, and then you have every, you could say, position in between. So this is a catalog of approaches to history done by, the project was done by Chipperfield architects and the London restoration architect Julian Harrop here. And this is one of the sketches from Chipperfield, where the structure has been completed with, that was destroyed during the war, with the new architecture, and then you have the new central room there, and this was the historic room, and now it has this appearance that is an interpretation. And you have some of the new rooms, the new architecture, and some of the old rooms where you have different kinds of you could say degrees of intervention. But what they have in common is that it has been very, very carefully mapped, and actually the same company that we're working with in Abu Dhabi, they also been involved in this project, and they have done several thick phone books about surveying, and they were lying on the table where every decision has been taken on that basis. So this is more or less the point of having, you could say, having moving forward from the modernistic dogmas. I'll just briefly run through a few of our own projects. This is Copenhagen. We have the Queen's Palace at the right, and then the big block with the light roof. You see, that is a parking building from 1932, made by Gundelag Pedersen, an architect which is not very famous, but of course you can see where he got his source of inspiration from. This is from 1932, and just 5 years after, it was expanded with 2 more stories. And when we met the building, it has been changed a bit like this. You see new ugly windows, and it's an appearance that was quite worn, and a lot of things has happened. So we had to try to restore this listed building, where the aim, of course, was that we should try to bring it back, because this is so clear that it was more or less really a conservation and restoration project, where we had to establish the style and appearance that it had, and maybe clean up a little bit about new things that have been attached. But it was quite bad when we got it, and this is the interior. And then we start working with the concrete, and modernistic concrete buildings, maybe they look quite firm and have this straight appearance, but they are very, very fragile into every change that you do. So it's very important that you have this attention very much to the details. But then, of course, there are some technical things about concrete and carbonization, which does that. Here we are removing quite a lot of the existing fabric, and that is absolutely necessary if the concrete has to live on. And maybe it looks quite rough. This is a water jet machine that removes concrete and the reinforcement can be treated again. It's a combination of this method and this cathodic method where you put electrical power into the reinforcement. And on the floor here you have a lot of the original material lying there, but that's the way it is. And then we try to find this balance between new and old, injecting epoxy and all these things, and now we have tried to clean up and bring it back. We reconstructed a lot of detailed facade elements, windows and doors, as a reconstruction, not the specific same historical profiles, but we made some new ones where the dimensions and the glass were as they were originally. So it was important for us that this building still had the authenticity of to be understood as a building from 1932 that just had been restored, of course a lot of new casting was done, changing of reinforcement, and this was one of the first approaches to make a copy of this old form, with the board. So you see every piece of wood. This was actually a little bit too much artificial, so we decided to go back and just make a very, very thin surface. And then there's always this problem with when you restore concrete surfaces, that you have to give it this finishing layer of some kind of anti-carbonization membrane, which is a big problem when it comes to the tactile qualities. But we have to do that, so it must be as thin as possible. In the interiors, we changed some of these ugly elements into something hopefully a little bit more relevant to the period, with new interiors and offices, and try to interpret some of the window profiles. So this is, say, the process for this building, the first garage building in Copenhagen. This is another one. This is a school in Copenhagen, which is a 1938 school. It is one of the, made by Kai Gottlob, one of the first schools where we have this aula, this central room. And we have done this preliminary survey about framing the conservation values, and again try to establish a common understanding. This is some of the historical photos, and this is what they look about today. And there are a lot of elements, and when it comes to, you could say, being a represent of the modernistic architecture, there's always a balance, and there's a local touch to it, but still it is clear where the source of inspiration comes from. This is the same matrix as you saw before that we're using, and then this is another part of the school where children with special needs they were trained, and you have there they. And some of the The issues, when you have a school, a classroom, then of course it has been transformed and different layers has been added, different technologies and installations. Some are okay and some are a big mistake, and we have to clean it up from an architectural point of view. This podium where the teacher was raised just one step from a pedagogical point of view. The teachers wanted to get rid of them, but the listing authorities wanted to keep them. So we're not really clear about what we're going to do there yet, but that is one of the discussions. Again, this thing between new function and historical architecture, where do you define the balance? Windows is extremely important, and one of the reasons for this project is that the interior climate, that is a big issue that you have to deal with, and you have to add in a lot of mechanical ventilation, but you see in older days they just open the window. And some of these windows must be preserved for every price. Maybe we can use some of the existing ducts and combine that with a new system. That is a part of the survey. And this is this hall where the children with special needs they were sleeping for midday. There was a glass roof that could be taken aside, so you can really have fresh air. And this is what it looks today. So it's about trying to find a function that can respect some of the qualities that is left. And again, this is a very good example of how fragile a lot of these modernistic buildings they are, because the details here are so important that you cannot do very much apart from just restoring it as it is. The school here has a brilliant scale. It is in a small house area, and this institution has been scaled down in a very very fine way from you could say a city perspective. And yes, so this is more or less you could say the point today when it comes to the way that we work with the modernism, by struggling with this dogma that we got now to have this is, you could say, the question today, to understand why and for whom things are conserved. And it is my experience that it is very very difficult to deal with this, and it doesn't matter if you're in Iceland, Berlin, Melbourne, Tehran, wherever. This is the question, and as architects, it gives us a lot of work because we need to understand from every part of the building why are we doing this and that. But it's a way of communication, which is so important. So if one of the points I'll just finish with today is that when we talk about the modernism, we talk about it very often as monuments, as an architectural statement. But within our profession, the old discussion between process and monument becomes more and more relevant when you have to deal with the historical architecture. Thank you.